right, welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast. We are back. We are live. It is Monday night. It's 9 o'clock. We got the full clan together. Although I do have to admit, it looks a little weird that Jonathan is on the bottom of the on the tripod of video screens. He's typically to my right, so now I'm kind of freaked out. But guys, Stephen Igo here, Scott Lowerbatcher, Jonathan Wagner. We got a successful week to recap, but first off, I just want to send kudos to both of you for absolutely holding it down in my absence last week. I guess, Scott, you were the unofficial host, so how do you think it went?
From my end, I didn't stumble over my words too much. So glad to have you back and glad to not be in the top left box.
Yeah, Jonathan, you made the prediction of the year. The only thing you were missing was correctly predicting a ruptured testicle, but otherwise you nailed every single thing that Jacob Jenkins Cowart did. 3 homers. You called for it in a week. He did it in one game. So congrats.
Thank you. I don't take that honor lightly, but when he did it first game, I was like, I'm really gonna pat myself on the back here tonight if he did it again over the weekend. And clearly, I may have gotten a prediction right, but at what cost? I just said that before we got on air. At what cost? And we'll see what I have in store later tonight.
Yeah, guys. So East Carolina, they go 4-0. They are now 24-8 overall. They are back inside the top 10. The sky was falling at this time last week. All of a sudden, everything is all good again. The Pirates beat the Wolfpack 13-9 on Tuesday. Then they sweep UCF, and they swept UCF before many teams even started a weekend series due to the weather. Due to obviously them playing Thursday because of Easter. So it was just a phenomenal week. I think I was the only person who predicted 4-0, and I'll be honest, I didn't really believe it, but I just kind of felt it. I was kind of hoping for it. Typically Cliff Godwin teams respond. They responded in the best way possible. So I do want to get you guys' take on the week as a whole before we kind of dive into some storylines. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Drop your comments in the obviously the comment section. I don't know where else you would drop them, but give that a response. We'll read and share as many comments as we can during the show. We always let that kind of guide us as we continue through this podcast. But we'll start first with Scott. Just a 4-0 week, and I think we all were hopeful of that, but you can never really expect it. So a pretty big response, right, from ECU.
For sure. I think I predicted 2-2 going into the week. It just hadn't felt like we were playing our best brand of baseball. And then against NC State, we really got the bats going and carried that into the weekend. And then, a really tough game on Friday. It's weird, your third game of a series being on Friday. But, a tough game where the weather didn't really cooperate, maybe getting us ready for a regional weekend, our opening game, playing in a rain delay and, in a game that was maybe tighter than what most people would have expected. But to come out against, 4 games against teams that can really hit the ball and to win all 4 games is, obviously a great week for us.
Wags, when they defeated NC State, they got the midweek, I don't want to say a bugaboo off their back, but certainly a big win. It just felt like, if they would have found a way to lose that game, it could have sent the week in the other direction. How big do you think find a way to win on Tuesday was?
Yeah, I think it was very important, especially just given what those midweek games in general just have been so frustrating this year, but just the added excitement, it being NC State, that's not just a win to get back on track. That's a win that can really set the tone moving forward for the year, I feel like. And, the players always get up for those games that I wasn't able to go because I had to work, but the atmosphere just on TV sounded awesome. And those games are always really exciting. And I think it did set the tone for the weekend. And, the midweek curse might be off your back for now. The Pirate Bats woke up when the heat came. It was warm on Tuesday. It was warm on Thursday in the doubleheader. So it was nice to see the Bats wake up and ECU win games because of their bats and not necessarily their pitching, because the rest of the season it's been the other way around. So all around, just a really nice week, and one that I think ECU really had to have at this time of the year.
All right, it was a good week for ECU, and the comment section is as barren as it is because you guys figured out last week when the Pirates have a tough result, you're going to hear all the negative questions possible. And thus far, we've got Let's Get It, Gents from Frank Durham. We've got What's Up, Fellows from Brandon Carr, whose son plays for the football team. Chuck Sales does have a couple of comments. And his first is love my Pirates, but no way we should be ranked number 9, maybe 15 or 16. Scott, you are our rankatologist. You're our bracketologist. Your thoughts on Chuck's comment that ECU is overrated?
Well, first off, I'll say if you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and share the stream as well. Maybe bring in some people that might not even know we're live. But to Chuck's comment, we talked about this a little bit last week. It's easy to say maybe a gut feeling you think we should be ranked 15th or 16th, or maybe Chuck's done more research. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But, unless you watch everybody in the top 25, it's hard to say where anybody should be ranked. But if you look at the teams that we leapt over this week, Boston College, I don't think their pitching's all that great. I think they've just bonded as a team and played really well. Kentucky is starting to get into the teeth of their schedule. A team that rose a lot in the poll, like Louisville, they've had a couple series losses. A team that we jumped this week in Tennessee they have 4 series losses on the weekend. Granted, they played some really good teams that they have losses to. And ECU still only has, I think, 3 weekend losses. And I think that's really important when you look at where you should rank teams. Because the most important games are played on the weekends. I know everybody always makes the joke one way or another about midweeks not mattering, but I think you would be hard pressed to find a team with a resume that's as good as ours. 24-8. We have an RPI 15, and we have 3 frontline starters that are all really, really good. And now we're starting to hit the ball. So yeah, I think 9th is fair. I wouldn't say we're top, 8 right now, even though I don't think Stanford is maybe as good as they're projected to be. I think we'll find out a lot about Stanford this week when they play. They're playing Texas Tech right now, actually, if you want to watch that and see another top 10 team. I don't know what Pac-12 network is on now, maybe Game Boy or YouTube or something. If you can find Stanford versus Texas Tech, you can see a top 10 team play, and then they go to Oregon this weekend. We'll find out a lot about them. But, I think over the course of a year, it shakes itself out. When we stumbled, we fell out of the top 10, and we slid down to 12 or wherever we were at. But, I would be hard-pressed to say, unless you've watched all top 25 teams, then I don't know if you can say that we don't deserve to be ranked number 9.
Yeah, McLean Anderson with a good point. He says he feels like everyone outside of the top 3 or 4 is flawed, and I agree. I mean, I probably haven't watched as much college baseball outside of ECU as a lot of people, including definitely Scott. But if you just follow the scores, there really only seems to be 2, 3, 4 dominant, consistent teams, and it pains me to say it. I feel like, I can't even say it. I can't give the guys in Winston-Salem that much credit.
They've earned it.
I was this close to actually giving them credit. But, I guess Wake Forest has to be considered one of those teams for now. Certainly, Vanderbilt's had a phenomenal year to this point. Really, that glut of SEC schools that are like, 3 through 6 behind Wake Forest, if not deeper. Those teams are just going to, I think, be hard pressed to be moved out of those roles. So LSU is obviously the most talented, complete team with all the transfers they've added. So it does feel like that top 5, that top 6 is going to be really tough to break into. But then after that, it's kind of just like a wave of up and down. So I don't know if ECU can get into that top 8. Other than win almost every game. What do you think, Jonathan? We kind of talk about this every week, the RPI, the midweeks, all that stuff, but it really comes back to just having good games every time out. Like as cliche as that sounds, like ECU can't afford to say, hey, we got to go 45-11 or whatever. Sorry, Scott. They just got to find a way to keep having weeks like they did this past week, not necessarily go 4-0, but you got 3-1 with a lot of 4-0s mixed in, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, ECU just they've got to go out and control what they can control, and that's winning as many baseball games as you can possibly win. And to me, I see that when I'm looking at college baseball, and I pay attention to it pretty closely, but I see a top 6, and then I see a pretty, I don't want to say sizable drop off, but a sizable drop off. I think once you get past, Arkansas, South Carolina at 5-6, then after that, it's you can make the case, I think, from maybe teams from 7 to 15, and I don't know the rankings off the top of my head, but I think that range is all very closely grouped together. And again, there's a lot of baseball left to be played. And for ECU, we talk about it every week, but the American is just not good. I think coming in, UCF was probably viewed as the next best competitor in the American, and God, they looked awful this weekend. So that doesn't give me a lot of hope. So in the end, it's just ECU has to go out and they have to win every weekend, because a loss is more probably – it hurts them a lot more than it would, say if South Carolina would have played game 3 against LSU this weekend and lost that game. ECU doesn't have those kinds of opportunities. So you have to take advantage of the ones you do get. And right now that includes midweeks. So just keep winning and control what you control, get healthy, win ball games, and call it a day. And that's all you can do.
All right, let's talk about the other theme of this podcast. As Chesapeake Pirate brings up, would like to get a rundown on all of our medical issues, who is hobbled, how bad, who is out, and when expected back. So I don't have a list. Listen, I should have wrote down all the names because I know I'm going to forget somebody, but it's my first podcast back. All right, give me some slack. I'm going to try and go through off the top of my head who's banged up. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. All right, so we'll start at catcher. You've got Justin Wilcoxon and Ryan McChrystal both battling back injuries. Wilcoxon did not look healthy at all swinging the bat this past weekend. McChrystal was also sick going into the series, so he only called a certain amount of innings. So you got both of your catchers battling back injuries. That's not ideal. Jacob Jenkins-Cowart, again, 3-homer game. Took a pitch square to the man region. He has a ruptured testicle. God, that hurts to say. He had to get it surgically repaired, from my understanding, on Friday night. I'm told he cannot run for 2 weeks. And then after that, looking at a scenario where, probably 3 weeks, I would think, for JJC, best case scenario. And then with the catchers, they're kind of day-to-day managing it. Garrett Saylor has been out since, I think, March 22nd when he pitched at – was it Campbell he pitched against? Or was it even before then? Either way.
I think it was the Campbell game in Fayetteville.
Okay. Oblique injury, so he is out. Cliff Godwin said today on 94.3 The Game he's starting to throw a little bit. Not sure if he will be back by this weekend or not. So he sounds week to week, but seems to be trending in the right direction. Riley Johnson is dealing with an ankle injury. He's been playing through that, but it's something he has to manage as far as pain management. I feel like I'm leaving somebody out. Or is that it?
Root's back.
I think AMAC is shaking off his wrist.
Yeah, AMAC's still kind of dealing with his wrist because he has a wrap, but I think he's fine. I think those are the main ones. I mean, the biggest one, and I'm going to look through the roster as I ask you guys this question just to make sure I'm not missing anybody. The JJC one's the main one. He was just starting to get hot. Not that the other guys aren't important, but to lose that bat in the middle of the lineup, we'll start with you, Scott. Just how big of a blow is that if he's out 2 to 3 weeks, which obviously he will be?
Yeah, I mean, he was the threat there, right? You had him and Moylan where you had to pitch to one of them. If they come up with guys on base, you can't just put them both on. So somebody's going to have to step up. I mean, there's certainly guys on the team that can do it, like Carter Cunningham, maybe Clonch some in a DH role. And we'll have to see. But, yeah, I mean, he is one of the 2 or 3 best hitters on our team and was trending towards being the best hitter on our team after this last week. So not having your 3-hole guy, I think, is going to be difficult to overcome. But we definitely have the guys that can do it.
Yeah, so the only other really injury-related note was Willie Lumpkin, but he's been back a couple weeks now. So, and the biggest concern for me is the catcher spot, which we'll get into here in a minute. But let's stay on JJC for a second. Wags, when you look at how ECU approaches this going forward, I mean, clearly there were already too many outfielders for the 3 spots. We know Luke Nowak has been DHing, even though he's an outfielder. He will likely stay there due to some defensive limitations at this point. But then you got 3 other guys: Riley Johnson, who we just mentioned, dealing with the ankle. You've got Carter Cunningham and Lane Hoover as well. Do you see anybody else entering that picture? Any other changes during this time with JJC sideline?
I mean, to me, I think it just opens up a lot of opportunities for those guys that you mentioned, and even more. There's flexibility with positions. I mean, I don't think Amac's going to move to corner outfield at some point this year. At this point, I feel like we would have seen that by now if he was going to even test it, just to get other guys at bats in the infield, maybe. So I think for those guys you mentioned, personally, I think Riley Johnson is a great center fielder defensively. His bat's cooled off a little bit, but like we mentioned, he, like a lot of people, are also not 100%. So, maybe if he can get back to full health and, start playing every day again, his back can start turning back on. He's come through at times. Lane Hoover, for how slow he started the season, I believe going into this weekend, he was hitting 450 around there since the Liberty Series. So Lane Hoover's turned it on. And I think at this point, he's back in the lineup every day. And then right field, Carter Cunningham has kind of been that guy lately. His bat was red hot for a while. His power came on for a little bit. But to me, I think it's interesting when you look at the batting order because, JJC was in that 2-hole. And, right now it's a gaping hole, honestly. I mean, I don't think there's a real clear-cut guy to do it because I think you have to keep Moylan in the 3-hole. Starling, you can probably move around, but I like keeping him in the 4 spot. And it's just you have to find someone who can make it work. Do you change a leadoff spot? I don't know. You have a lot of flexibility now. And, yeah, I'm hoping it's 2 to 3 weeks for JJC. Wyatt Langford for Florida had the same exact injury, ruptured testicle, and he missed 15 days exactly. I looked it up. 15 days. He's played every game since then. So, you hope it's a similar thing, but it probably just becomes a pain tolerance thing. He's probably going to put on a cup when he plays from now on. And, I mean, yeah, it's just that's a tough one because you wonder, how is it going to be when he comes back? You hope he can get over that, just mentally stepping back into the box. Every time you swing, am I going to foul it off again? And you hope he can overcome that. But I think that's also another important storyline to come, when he does make his way back into the lineup.
Jack Dover says we need some Cam Clonch this week. Yeah, I think we're all 3 Cam Clonch fans, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, look, the more Clonch, the better. And he's just never really gotten a chance to be a full-time guy, but he's a great team guy. He's
Down the Clonch.
Man just broke out a Clonch shell in the middle of this show. He's had some clutch ABs, some tough ABs. And I would like to see him get a shot to play corner outfield. He can do it. Maybe not to the level that some of the other guys on the roster can, but it's a way to get his bat in the lineup. We've talked about it plenty. Would like to see Alec Makaravich maybe play some outfield or get a day off and see some Dixon Williams at third or some Connor Rasmussen. But, we've talked about that for 5-6 straight weeks now. It hasn't happened yet. Really, I don't know if it will happen this year, especially with Amac heating up the way he is. And honestly, Cunningham is playing well. Riley Johnson's playing well. So I just don't know if you can take one of those guys out right now. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a situation where Clonch, he's got to take advantage of his opportunities when he gets them. You would think Moylan after this year is probably going to go pro. Next year, Clonch could step into that starting first base job. So that's a possibility to monitor heading into the offseason. So, yeah, any other injury questions, let us know. We'll answer that for sure. Could we see Dixon Williams enter the mix in the outfield, Zach asked. Right now, I don't think so. If he's going to enter the mix, it'll probably be at third base, probably be at DH. And I think you would see, even Amat go play outfield before Dixon. But I just, I don't know. I don't see Dixon playing the outfield right now, even though I would like to see him get more at bats. All right, Johnny Gardner asks, what does Nick DeLisi need to show some improvement to see the field based on both catchers having some lingering injuries? I don't think any of us are out there to know what Nick DeLisi does well or doesn't do well. I just think it's hard to be a freshman catcher when you look at everything that happens, Scott, with coming in and trying to catch a pitching staff, trying to catch Treya Savage. There are no Treya Savages in high school, so I'm sure that's probably the biggest thing is just the defensive managing the staff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at how early last year, how much pass balls and pitches that were called wild pitches, but maybe could have been blocked, affected us really early in the year. And I think that's something that Cliff is likely trying to protect against right now, especially if you look at our staff with guys like Savage and Groves that throw balls that move a lot and in maybe ways that a freshman catcher wouldn't have seen before, and would only have seen in limited practices behind two really really good catchers too. I think if you get down to it, you look at McChrystal and you look at Wilcoxon and how good they really are. These are draft pick type catchers. And DeLisi may grow into that as well, but it's going to take some time for that to happen.
All right. Cam Murphy has played outfield before, is what Scott Jackson says. And, yeah, he's another guy who could potentially play. Only has a few outfield, a few at-bats this year. So you got guys that can definitely step in if needed. It's just, with the scenario ECU is running right now, Carter Cunningham continues to put up quality at-bats. And to me, y'all may disagree, but I think at this point you almost have to have Riley Johnson in center field with the way he's playing defense. Jonathan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you have to. You can try Carter Cunningham there. You can try Lane Hoover there. Both of them have gotten looks in the past couple of weeks. But to me, it's when those two are in the outfield, and I'm not saying they're bad necessarily. I think Carter had a couple of plays this weekend where he probably could have – his reaction to a line drive I think in the same inning, back-to-back batters maybe, his reaction to a line drive wasn't what it needed to be, and he ended up not getting to the ball, and both of them dropped for base hits, and I believe a run scored. So that's not ideal, but I do think playing center field, seeing balls off the bat is completely different than it is in a corner spot. And, I think there's a noticeable improvement when Riley Johnson's on the field. Any ball over his head, I trust him to get to. Any ball in, I trust him to get to or make a play happen. And I also think Riley Johnson's arm is better than you would expect when you're looking at Riley Johnson. I think his arm makes up for it when he's so fast. He can get to any ball. I feel like he can get a ball in. He's not going to throw guy out all the time, but he does what needs to be done. And to me, he's far and away the best defensive outfielder on this team. So I think to me that, especially with some defensive, issues that have popped up at times over this year, I think you have to have that in the lineup. And again, his bat has that upside. We've seen it before. So I think he's I don't want to say worth the risk because he's pretty safe defensively. So, but yeah, I would have him in the lineup every day just for defensive purposes.
Yeah, and he does a decent job of working the count. And, maybe you don't want Riley Johnson, Lane Hoover, Luke Nowak all in the same lineup because you kind of get some similar looks there. But at this point, if they're three of your better guys, you just got to go with it with JJC out. And hopefully you can manufacture enough runs, get enough production from AMAC, Moylan, other areas that have a little bit more pop. So something else I wanted to ask you guys about. Sounds like we talked about earlier, Garrett Saylor could potentially be back in the coming weeks. What should his role be with the pitching staff has done well? Landon Ginn has kind of stepped up here these last few weeks since returning from suspension. Saylor was trending upwards in that midweek starter role. Now it seems like Zach Root is going to be that guy. He started the last few midweek games. He's getting the ball tomorrow against Old Dominion. Is it back to the back end of the bullpen? Is it working them back in slowly? Scott, what are your thoughts on Garrett Saylor, kind of how you see him, assuming he's healthy here in these next few weeks?
Yeah, with an oblique injury, I think working him back in slowly, like you said, is going to be important. But I really liked him in that midweek starter role. We talked a lot about how important those games can be for RPI purposes and how many we've lost because we haven't had good outings to start those games and we've gotten behind and then couldn't catch back up. I think he had gone two pretty good outings, and including the Campbell outing before he got hurt and came out. I'd love to see him get back to that role because sometimes in regional weekend you do need a fourth starter. I mean, he's a guy that has a ton of experience, a guy that I would trust on that regional final day when you played either 4 or 5 games. Hopefully, only 4 if we are in that situation and not having to come through the losers bracket again. But a guy that you could trust to go out there and give you 4 or 5 really good innings in a regional final, or if something were to happen to one of the other starters throughout the season, could step into that role as the third weekend guy, and you could prepare him by having him on Tuesday, getting that starter mindset to go out there and pitch 80 to 90 to 100 pitches in an outing.
Yeah, I think if this team is going to get to the promised land, I think they need Garrett Saylor. I think they need Zach Root. They need to stay healthy with the starting rotation. But I just think those 5 guys, along with the other back end bullpen guys, can really help take them to another level. Jonathan, your thoughts on Garrett Saylor, where you would like him to kind of slot in as he hopefully makes his way back here soon?
Yeah, I do think, I agree. I loved him in that midweek role. I mean, he did so well. He finally looked like Garrett Saylor again, right before he got hurt. But I do think you have to bring him along slowly. It's not worth the risk of, just throwing him back out there and go for it. No, you bring him back. He pitches an inning. Maybe he doesn't pitch the rest of the week. Yeah, I think that's how you have to handle it because you can't risk not having him in the postseason because he's that valuable just for his versatility. He can start a game 4. He can come out of the bullpen in game 1. He can do anything you need him to, and I'm going to trust him to get the job done. But I do think right now it's nice because I do think Jake Hunter, with what Jake Hunter has done, obviously ECU doesn't beat NC State without Jake Hunter this week. So I think Jake Hunter being there and kind of it's Zach Root and Jake Hunter right now on midweeks. And I think that kind of allows you to ease Saylor back in because I still think the rotation is good enough on the weekend to where you don't need Garrett Saylor to do what he did last year. You don't need him and Carter Spivey to come out and save the day every day out of the bullpen. You can afford to just have him come out, throw an inning, whether it's in a high pressure spot, bases juiced with a 1-run lead or with a 6-run lead and nobody on in a 9th. Garrett Saylor can do anything you need him to. So I bring him along slowly, but I'd like to see him in a midweek role, but I also don't think you have to have him there.
And speaking of Jake Hunter, Chesapeake Pirates says, what will be the role for Jake Hunter the rest of the season? I'll be honest, guys. I mean, 2 weeks into the season, I really didn't think Jake Hunter would play a big role for this pitching staff. He wasn't pitching a lot at all. I think he'd only thrown in garbage time. Didn't have the best offseason, but he's been awesome. I mean, he's like I can't help but smile thinking about it because like we as sports viewers and guys who are trying to draw conclusions when we watch sports, we kind of pigeonhole guys as, Jake Hunter, he's this contact-oriented guy. He's going to give up hard contact, but he's going to go in and throw strikes. And that's kind of what, in my mind, I had pigeonholed him in. And then all of a sudden he comes out here, he's throwing this nasty slider consistently. All of a sudden you look at his numbers. I mean, he's striking guys out at an extremely high clip, and teams aren't hitting him. I mean, he's got 23 strikeouts to 5 walks in 19 innings. Opponents are hitting 188 against him. He's given up 1 home run all season. And so that just goes to show you that how much of a jump a guy can make. I'm to the point now with as good a stuff as Jake Hunter is showing, I wouldn't mind him pitching in the back end of the bullpen as the season gets going. Obviously, as we talked about, the midweek games are critical for RPI, so I'm cool with him also staying in that role. But as you shift more towards the postseason conference tournament, I wouldn't mind seeing Jake Hunter become a bullpen arm for middle to late game situations. What do y'all think? We'll start with Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing this year that's very different from last year is how little we've needed bullpen arms and as many guys to step up. And that's, I think, helped our team where guys don't have to pitch every weekend. They've had some time, if somebody's struggling with something, they can work on it, figure it out, and then come into games and they don't have to get thrown into the fire week in and week out where they have to figure it out. When we were at that Duke game, I think every one of us got asked a question about Jake Hunter from some random person. And we were like, we just don't know. Like we don't know what's the deal. I think in the preseason podcast, I said I hoped he could be just the Tuesday guy, and now it's looking like maybe that's more like Sailor or Root. But yeah, I mean, I think Jake Hunter's a guy that we trust now to go give you 2 or 3 innings in an outing. And I think that's important. If you look at, how you Savage has pitched, where he's gotten you into the 6th or 7th inning on Friday night, if that's a game that's, maybe a 3 or 4 run lead, I trust Hunter to come in and finish the game. If you look at, maybe how some of the Sunday games have gone, if they turn into slugfest, then Jake Hunter's a guy, if he hadn't been able to get in on Friday or Saturday, he's a guy that can come in and give you 2, 3, 4 innings and get you to the end of Sunday, when teams are starting to run out of pitching. So I think his role is going to be something that's only continues to grow in importance as the season does.
Jonathan, we'll follow up with you. Also, we got another question about what role a pitcher will play. I'll let you handle both of these. What role could Merritt Beaker play in? So give me Jake Hunter, Merritt Beaker. Who's closing this one? Who's closing these games out for the Pirates?
All right. Well, with Jake Hunter, I do think, again, I do think it's a luxury that you're not in the same position you are last year. Because last year, again, starting pitchers weren't going deep into games. Just for the large majority of the season, it just wasn't happening. So you were having to have those, and I'm going to bring back a term from, I believe Scott created in our preseason pod, but a super bullpen guy, or it was a super reliever. Maybe that was it.
Yeah.
But, Carter Spivey and Garrett Salo, that's what they did last year. They pitched every day. They pitched multiple innings a day sometimes, and that's because they had to. But now, I think due to the starting rotation depth and depth in the ball games, plus the bullpen depth, just the number of arms you have that could go. Wyatt Lunsford Shankman could be that guy. You have plenty of – Landon Ginn could be that guy. You have guys to pick from, which is good because personally I don't see Jake Hunter as a guy who's going to come out and pitch multiple times in a week or a weekend especially. I don't know, but I just don't see it for him in that role. So I do think it's, following us to Savage if Shankman's maybe not ready to go, and pitching a couple innings and closing it out and saving the rest of the bullpen for the rest of the weekend. That's an important role too. But so Jake Hunter, I really think his role is going to evolve as a year and might go back and forth, and that's okay. And I'll transition here to Merritt Beaker, but I don't see him having much of a role down the stretch because I just don't think at this point, when he has gotten opportunities, he hasn't found the strike zone. And I think when you look at early in the year, and obviously the Duke game was a pretty good point to look back on, the pitching staff was struggling because they couldn't find the zone. And I think the biggest reason ECU has found success since then is pitchers have started to find the zone. And I think Merritt Beaker is probably the one guy maybe who was in that game who maybe hasn't done that. And I still think Merritt Beaker could turn into a valuable piece, maybe not this year, but down the road in his career. But I just think at this point there's too many guys in front of him. And I think when it comes down to it, if you're in a tight spot in a weekend and you're going to a lefty, your first choice on a weekend is probably Eric Ritchie if Zach Root is pitching midweeks. And then after that, you're probably still going back to Zach Root. So it's a numbers game at some point, and it comes down to trust. And at this point, I think he still has a ways to go before he earns that back.
Good answers, Wags. Thanks for taking on those. Chesapeake Pirate has an interesting question. He says, how does our team fielding this year compared to what I remember as being pretty good in the recent past? Moylan is a jewel, but a little concerned about shortstop and some outfield play. So right now, guys, ECU has a 974 fielding percentage. That is the lowest for an ECU baseball team since 2017, which was the season that we shall not remember. 2016 was even lower. That was a much better season. I think the defense is not on par with what we've seen in recent years for ECU. I mean, we have a big enough sample size right now, guys, that I think we can make that assumption. Joey Barini has done a really good job at shortstop. I just think range-wise, he's a little limited, but he's still been solid. He's made all the routine plays for the most part. Too many mistakes at times in the outfield. Too many mistakes in the infield, really, on just routine balls. Guys will make incredible plays, then they'll make a routine ball mistake. So I am a little concerned about the defense as ECU moves into postseason play, but I think the strikeout ability of the pitching staff can help overcome that to a degree. But I don't know. What are y'all's gut feelings on the defense at this point as we sit here and move towards the latter third of the season?
Yeah, it's definitely not as good as it was last year. That was really the strength of our team. We were a top 10 team nationally defensively, and this year obviously we're not. Fielding percentage is obviously a good metric, but it doesn't always tell the whole story. I think Houston has a really good fielding percentage because they don't get to a lot of balls. And I think you see that some Barini's limited range compared to a guy like Agnos who had elite range. You look in center field, this past weekend, some with Cunningham and Riley Johnson and other guys, they don't get to some of the balls that Bryson Worrell got to, right? So some balls are falling in for hits that doesn't show up on fielding percentage because guys just aren't getting there. If you take a bad read on a ball and don't get there, that doesn't show up in fielding percentage either. So it's definitely been a drop off. It's definitely something that I didn't expect to see this year. I thought we would still be pretty good defensively, but you just have to make up for it in other ways. Our pitching is so much further ahead this year than it was last year. You're seeing a lot more strikeouts. So maybe, what we lost in fielding, we gained in pitching. But yeah, I mean, we're still a good defensive team. I don't want people to think we're not good at fielding the ball. We're just not an elite defensive team like we were last year.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, I mean, the 16 team, 971 fielding percentage, and they were as close to Omaha as anybody. So, and that was probably the least talented team of any of those teams. So, it doesn't mean ECU can't get there. I think at times it's been a strength. Like Barini has made some incredible plays. AMAC has made some incredible plays. Starlin has great range for a second baseman. It's just you got to be more consistent when the outs become a premium in the postseason. So, Jonathan, is that a concern of yours at all?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a concern. And, I mean, there are some plays and, some plays that should be made, whether it's a ground ball and, a ball wasn't thrown to the right spot. I think the Houston weekend, there was a ball hit to Starling, and I brought this up before, but it was a ball hit to Starling to his left towards first base, and there was a run on first that was running to second. And Starling, he made a great play to get to the ball, but I thought he had plenty of time to try to gun the guy at first. And he just held it, which, may have been a smart decision, but I think previous years, those plays are made, whoever's there. And I also think, and this is health related with injuries we've talked about, but I do think that the catchers have been a little inconsistent as well. I think we've seen that both guys have good arms. Wilcoxon can throw guys out. McChrystal has a cannon of an arm. McChrystal's not always accurate with his throw, as accurate as he should be. And I do think we're starting to see, as the injuries and maybe the wear and tear of the season drags on, I do think we're starting to see a little more pass balls in recent weeks. And I think that's a little bit of a concern to me. So that's another area. I think that's more concerning to me than anything else, the catchers. And it's just, you can't really blame them. I mean, those guys are probably exhausted. Those guys are far from 100%. And they're still being asked to go catch, some of the best pitchers in the country and control a run game. So, that's no easy task. But I think to me, that's where I'm most concerned. But I also think if they can both get healthy and you can kind of, rotate them a little more evenly over the coming weeks and the next month or so, then I do think that'll kind of fix itself as the season goes on.
McLean Anderson adds Alec Burleson just had an RBI triple. Good for Alec. And other NL Central news, the Cubs are beating my crappy Mariners 2-1. The Mariners can't hit Drew Smiley. The Mariners suck, apparently, so at least we had last season. How are things going in Cincinnati Reds land, Scott?
I think we were 3-3 the last I looked. We had a couple rainouts with the Cubs and the Phillies. But yeah, I didn't get to watch much this weekend. I watched opening day, the first couple of games, but I need to get focused back up. I know we're playing the Braves tonight, but I don't know the score, so someone can throw that in the comments if they want. Only if it's good though.
Right now, Braves lead 3-1 in the ninth. So
don't put it in the
comments. As far as Jonathan Wagner's team, he has he's got the Nationals, and good news for you, Jonathan. It's 0-0, so they're not losing in the top of the first in Anaheim as they take on the Angels.
It's not the bottom of the first yet. I believe Corbin's on the mound. Patrick Corbin's on the mound tonight, so they will be down soon. And I mean, hey, a series split, 4-game split at the Colorado Rockies. And let me just say this: if I was a betting man, I genuinely believe there's a chance the Nationals lose 120 games. And I fully expect it. So let's have some fun.
Luckily, they're blacked out, so you don't have to watch them.
That's a good thing. Yeah, I think so.
All right, moving back to college baseball, Christian Bateman says, what do you think is the purpose of UCF's coach arguments on Friday? And so I was watching this game on TV, still haven't returned to Clark LeClaire since having the baby, so hoping to get back to a game or two this week. But I did check this out on TV, and I found it hilarious that Cliff Godwin was giving it the wrap it up sign. I mean, he was doing the aggressive wrap it up sign too. He was tired of it.
That might be my favorite thing Cliff Godwin's ever done in his history of DC baseball.
It has to be, man. It was so on point because I think everybody watching or viewing the game felt the same way. He had to argue for at least 5 minutes. I mean, he was out there a long time.
It's not longer than that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think his purpose was just to get ejected. I think he was just going to be out there until he got ejected.
I will say, I think that could be it. But I also do think, just watching and being unbiased, I do think that there was a valid reason to at least have a conversation. I mean, it was a Carter Cunningham bunt. It was popped up. The ball was pretty much right on the first base line. And, the catcher kind of went for the ball, but Cunningham was in the baseline. But they collided. The catcher and Carter Cunningham, they kind of made contact with each other. So I can see why he would be at least having a conversation and wondering, was that interference? Cunningham's entitled to the baseline. But, I can understand why he's at least going to go out and have that conversation. But I do think once the umpire is probably telling you to shut up and go back to your dugout, you should probably listen and not drag on when you're already struggling to get a game in. This is already after the game was restarted, I believe. And at this point, it's like, just go home. You're going to get swept. And God, Cliff Godwin, just telling him to hurry it up is my favorite Cliff Godwin moment in the history of Cliff Godwin. I will praise him for the rest of my life for that moment alone. So yeah, it was the most entertaining part of the weekend, I think.
All right, so we're going to get back to Greg Lovelady in a second. Big news, the Reds apparently just tied the game at 3-3. Also, the Mariners, as it happened, just tied the game in the ninth inning. Both the Mariners and Reds just tied the game in the ninth inning. And the Nationals still have a runner on first with 2 outs in the top of the first. So the Nationals not losing. All 3 of our teams at the moment are not losing in live baseball action. This is a historic moment on the Hoist the Colors Bucks on the Pond podcast. Anyways, Greg Lovelady, Scott, By the way, anytime any of us are going on too long in a segment, I want us to all go. Just wrap it up.
That's also what they were doing with their bats at Central Florida. They were
Yeah.
just shaving them up. So,
So what's the deal on that? Because somebody asked, and I know you sent the video to us earlier. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I did watch the first response, and then my son wanted to watch a frog video, so I had to change it back. So Philip asked thoughts on UCF's coach's response to the allegation that UCF used altered bats earlier in the season. So can you give us the rundown on this, Scott?
So a former player alleged that they used hot bats or shaved bats. I don't know what the term is now. I've been out of the corked bat game for a while. But that was up until the Dartmouth series when I think UCF was like 15-5. And I think they're 2-10 since this thing happened. And in his answer, he wouldn't unequivocally say that they were not juicing the bats. He just was like, whatever happened, and we've addressed it. And if there it could be true, it might not be true. I mean, it just was. I understand why his argument lasted so long, because I mean, he couldn't say one way or another. I don't know. I think if you're UCF and if you're the American, you have to start really addressing these allegations, because they were shaving their bats and jumped out to a 15-5 record that wasn't really indicative of who they were or how they were playing. I think there needs to be some real punishment for that. That needs to be some suspensions. I think that's the thing you should and could lose scholarships for. I think it compromises the integrity of the game. It goes so far beyond, sign stealing or, trying to gain a competitive advantage here or there. It's a real problem. And these guys are using metal bats. The balls are jumping off the bats in college baseball harder than they ever have. And you don't want to see an injury, on a guy smoking 1 1/3 on a hot bat that doesn't meet regulations. So I would hope the conference responds to what's going on and makes a big deal about this, because, honestly, it's just completely atrocious the way that he responded to the allegations.
Now I can't wait to watch that video. But yeah, if they're honestly cheating and they still suck, then
well, they were 15-5 while they were allegedly cheating. So with some wins over like Florida State or something like
Clemson.
that too. So, Clemson, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the UCF still sucks, so good for them, I guess, for having a 15-5 record and now being 17-15. So since that point, they've gone 2-10.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something there. I mean, granted, they still hit the ball pretty well this weekend. All right, wrap it up, Igo. All right, what is the most competitive conference series left on the schedule? Frank says Wichita State. I kind of have to agree with him. Wichita looks like it's playing well. Any other thoughts here? And ECU always seems to struggle at Wichita. Do y'all guys have any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Wichita for me. I think they have one of the best two-way players in the country too. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but
it's like Peyton Toll or Tolley
or
something.
Toll,
something like that. So that'll be a tough one, but after that, you're really kind of grasping for straws. I don't think really you can. I don't think you can really make a case for anybody else being tough, and that sucks to say, but I think it's true. And Wichita State is probably a stretch too, but amongst the competition, that's it.
Yeah, but if you look at where that series lies, we play at Charlotte, at Wichita State, and then come back and play in Raleigh. So that 5-game road stretch, I would say, definitely is the most difficult 5-game stretch that we have left this year. And that's the heart of it, 3 games on the road in Wichita. A program that's, won a national championship. I know they hadn't been as good recently. But, yeah, and quite frankly, we hadn't played great on the road either. So, I would definitely put Wichita at the top of the most competitive series.
And I don't know what it is about Cincinnati, but they always seem to play ECU extremely tough, especially in Ohio. Maybe it's just because they're in Cincinnati, and that is the greatest baseball city in America, as Scott would say.
Chili capital of the world, or something like that.
Yeah, Cincinnati. Not my favorite place, but I do want to see a Reds game one day. All right, let's see here. Zach Griffin says, I think early game offensive production is more of a concern than fielding. I expect the fielding to get better as the season goes on. You know, I think the early offensive production this past week was good. So I almost feel like that's going to get better more so than the fielding. Like the fielding kind of is what the fielding is. I don't know. Do y'all have any thoughts here?
Yeah, our bats tend to heat up with the weather. Sorry, but so I think that once the weather warms up, that you'll see some more offensive production. Balls start flying out of right field. But fielding is what it is. You don't tend to field better as the weather gets better. Go ahead, John.
No, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the 2 days, 3 games this week that ECU hit very well were warm. And then the day ECU didn't hit as well was not warm and rainy. So, I mean, I also think that's not a coincidence that ECU's bats did seemingly wake up when the sun came out. And so, I do think there's still questions about the offense. I do think that's a valid concern because I share it. I have the same one. But I do think, when you look at the whole body of work, I think the offense is still – I think the offense has done a good job for the most part this year at working counts, making the pitcher work. It's just finishing the at-bat. You might have a good at-bat and you might see 10 pitches, but then you strike out swinging, or then you put a weak ball into play and nothing happens from it. And I think that's where I have concern, and that's where I'd like to see improve. But again, I think as the sun comes out and the balls start flying a little farther, I think those things are kind of going to solve themselves as long as everyone stays healthy.
All right, I'm going to run through some of these questions so we get to our predictions and get out of here. Some of us got young children, not Jonathan Wagner, that we know of.
Everybody but Jonathan Wagner.
Can confirm I do not either.
Zach wants to know how his baby eye go. Cannon, my little girl, is doing great. She's 10 days old. I'm tired, but she's honestly been a great baby thus far, knock on wood. She sleeps well as long as she's fed. So I'm sure as soon as I get done with this podcast, I'll have to go feed her. But everything's going well. And so we appreciate, as I said earlier, Jonathan and Scott filling in. And but certainly can't complain thus far. Brandon Carr wants to know what's in the pink solo cup. Right now is empty. Oh,
no, it wasn't. It is now. It is now.
I just spilled water all over my computer.
I mean, you said it was empty, and now it is. So.
It is empty, and I need to go get a paper towel to clean this up. So as I do that, y'all answer the other question. Scott, what's the rest of that Juicy J cert say?
This is a Juicy J IPA from Legion Brewing in Charlotte. I had a friend that was a bartender there, and she got me this shirt. And I also big Juicy J fan, 3-6 Mafia, the whole crew, most known unknowns. Wags, what day are you going to be in Chapel Hill?
All right, so the final part of this question is, in what day is Wags going to be in Chapel Hill for the Miami series this week? Can confirm I will not be in Chapel Hill, and that was a one-time thing. I promise. But I will say I will only be at one game this weekend in Greenville. I will only be one game, period. That will be Friday, and then I'll be back in my hometown celebrating my mom's birthday on Saturday and Sunday. But I will not be in Chapel Hill. And I will not be in Chapel Hill again for the rest of the season. That's a promise.
Until we play there in the Supers.
I'll be wearing purple and gold, baby.
UCJ is also what is happening in the middle of Igo's keyboard right now. So,
yeah, that's
that was good.
I really thought my cup was empty. I just poured water all over.
That's why you
my
gotta get on the
keyboard.
water bottle. Once you have kids that are
Yeah.
little and can knock stuff over, it's water bottles from there on out.
That was a major foul on my end. But it is water, thankfully. Otherwise, that would have been a real bitch. All right. Buddy Martinez says, think it's Memphis leading up to the Campbell game. Is that the most competitive conference
Probably.
series?
Yeah, let's see what we got here. So
Ain't no way in hell I'm picking Memphis to be the most competitive conference series.
I would
No
say
disrespect.
no series at home would I
Yeah.
pick as the most competitive conference series. At this point, at Cincinnati, at USF to end the season. I feel like we haven't ended seasons well in the last few years. That last week, and I think last year against, I think it was Houston that we ended the season with. We did pretty well, but specifically the last game of the regular season, I feel like we've lost that game like every year. But yeah, I definitely think it's probably at Wichita to this point. They do have somebody that will be an MLB type talent on their team. I don't know that Memphis has that yet. Don't know that Cincinnati has that, and USF doubtful as well.
Wags, the Nationals lose, or they're losing now 2-0 in the first. So
I told you it happened.
called it.
I called it.
Random stat from Johnny Robertson says the Pirates scored 13 runs in the second inning on Thursday versus UCF. They scored 9 runs in the second inning. In their other 30 games combined, they are 7-0 when they score a run in the second inning. Great stats, Johnny Gardner. Chesapeake Pirate says, how important will it be to not lose a third game in a row to ODU tomorrow night? I can guarantee you that Cliff Godwin is reminding them every single day, every single second that ODU swept them last year. I think they'll come out very motivated on Tuesday night with Zach Root on the mound. Opinion on the transfer commitment of Bobby Pettiford. And rumor is he shares his alma mater with Scott. Although you have some dispute here that he's a Durham native is what he claims. Is that a party foul?
I feel like there's a contingency of folks from the Butner-Creedmoor area that just claim to be from Durham. And I don't know where he was born. I don't know how long he may or may not have lived in Durham. I don't know that much about him. But I grew up with a lot of people that when we would go places would say, I'm from Durham. And I'd be like, you are from STEM. That is not where you're from. You are from Tally Ho. You are not from Durham. You can't just come out here claiming you're from.
Are these real places?
Yeah, they're southern Granville County towns.
Tally Ho?
Tally Ho, Stems, Stovall in the north.
It sounds like you're like living in a Game of Thrones fantasy land, like just making up places.
I wish I was. Sassafras Fork. Down the road. Stem has 2 stoplights now, so maybe if he's from there, I'll start playing.
Right.
But yeah, he is a
Stem.
fellow Viking. I looked for a South Granville shirt today, and they're all either too small or too old to put on anymore. But yeah, glad to see a South Granville kid make his way to ECU, and really looking forward to seeing him play well for the Pirates.
So I just talked to Bobby right before we did this podcast. So I'll have the interview up sometime tomorrow. But great young man, really good interview. He was fired up to be a Pirate. Kind of said that he said the most impressive thing about the recruiting process was how much Coach Schwartz and the coaching staff as a whole recruited him. He said it was the best he's been recruited since high school. They made him a priority. They made his family feel like a priority. They recruited the whole family. So from the day he entered the portal, I think he kind of felt ECU was going to be it. And when he made his visit this weekend, that was a big pickup for the program. North Carolina kid coming back home. And so certainly getting Bobby Pettiford, who I would have liked to see him come to ECU at a high school a few years ago, but getting him to come back now with his ability to run the point, score the ball off the dribble, and he said he wants to expand his shooting game. So I think he's going to be a really good fit with the core that's coming back. So he's also said he's already working on recruiting other guys as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the next few weeks transpire. Christian Bateman says who else we're looking at in the portal. They're looking for a shooter and a big. So that's all I got for you. Check out hoistthecolors.net, ECU basketball VIP recruiting thread. We're updating it every day, Christian. You can sign up now. A single $1 for your first month, and you can read all about it. And you don't even have to ask me about it. You can get it straight off the board. We got a couple of names that we're monitoring that could be visiting here soon. All right, let's get back to baseball, and let's close out our show with our favorite segment, our prediction segment. ECU takes on ODU on Tuesday. They owe the Monarchs some revenge. 2 losses in a row. Need a W, and then they host Cincinnati this weekend. So we will start with, I'll tell you what, let's start with Jonathan, and then we'll go back to you, Jonathan, for your bonus prediction at the very end of all of our predictions.
Okay, so I do think I'm going to go with 4-0, and it's 4 home games this week. Cincinnati's this weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure before I set that in stone. But a theme I've talked about all year is I do have concerns about being on the road, and I think ECU is going to take full advantage of being another 4-game home week, a long homestand. So I think the crowds are going to be great. They should be great this weekend. The weather looks nice tomorrow, and while I'm here, I am going to go ahead and get this plug in right now. But ECU women's lacrosse does play at 4:00 tomorrow inside Johnson Stadium. North Carolina, the Tar Heels are in town, defending national champions. Very big game for ECU. So if you're not working later in the afternoon tomorrow, go out before baseball. Go out to Johnson Stadium, watch some lacrosse. It's a big game. Should be a good atmosphere. So go on out there. But then afterwards, I'm going to walk over to Clark LeClaire and watch the first of 4 wins this week. And, yeah, I'll go with that. And then I'll be back later for my bonus.
Scott, you going 4-0, or are you predicting a setback somewhere along the way?
So both the teams we play this week have 7 road wins. ODU is 7-3. Cincinnati is 7, and now I got to look at it again. 7-10. So I think ODU is going to come in fired up. Cincinnati has played 17 road games. That's a lot of road games for anybody to have played. So they're going to be experienced in playing on the road. So I'm going to go with 3-1. I think somebody gets us at one point. The weather it's not looking great. We actually have a golf trip coming up to Greenville this weekend, so I'll be in town at all your local courses, and then maybe out for a game on Saturday. And so if you see me, say hi. But yeah, I think we'll see maybe 1 loss on the weekend, maybe a weather game, something like that. So 3-1.
4-0. 4-0. I'm feeling it. I think the biggest key for me is, again, winning Tuesday against Old Dominion. I think Cincinnati is going to provide a test this weekend. They always seem to play ECU tough. I just think ECU's bullpen, like Cincinnati's pitching depth, is always so poor, and I think ECU at home will be able to grind out enough at bats to find a way to score more runs and sweep this series at home. So for me, the big key is finding a way to win against Old Dominion, getting enough quality pitching, getting enough offense against a quality team. I'm going 4-0. I think ECU extends its winning streak to 8, although, of course, every time I feel good about a prediction, the opposite happens, or not the opposite, but definitely not the prediction happens that I predict. So hopefully they find a way to get it done. But 3-1 would be a solid week either way. Wags, let's hear your prediction. So last week, for those who missed it, you predicted Jacob Jenkins Carrot will hit 3 bombs. He did just that. Can you top it? All the pressure is on your shoulders.
So let's just get it out of the way. I'm never going to top it. Just the epicness of being the first prediction. For those of you who remember my time as a Hoist of Colors intern, when Igo and I did our football game predictions, I always did a little bonus, whether it was CJ Johnson with a 100-yard day. I always did it. I like doing fun stuff like that. And I didn't expect it. When he hit 2 against NC State, I'm like, oh wow, my weekend just got a lot easier. And then there you go. And as I'm speaking, the Nationals cut it to 2-1. So we have hope. But I'm going to stick with a similar prediction in the fact that I'm going to stick with a power and a home run type prediction. But I do think it's going to come from maybe an unlikely spot. I'm only going to predict 1 homer this week. I'm going to say Riley Johnson will hit a home run this week. And I think that's fair for a bonus bold-ish prediction. You know, he hit 3 his freshman year, 2021. He has 1 this season. So in 151 at-bats, he has 4 homers. So he has the pop. We've seen it. But he's not a prototypical power guy. I think he's going to be in the lineup all 4 games this weekend in center field. So I think Riley Johnson, you know, you're going to have to find a way to replicate that power you lost by Jacob Jenkins-Cowart. He was starting to turn it on. Josh Moreland can do it. Jacob Starling can do it. But Riley Johnson will be the guy to hit a home run this week. There we go.
I like that prediction. You know, it's like, you know, if it happens, it won't top Jacob Jenkins-Cowart, but it will be like just good enough to be like, damn, like that Wags, like he's really good.
Look, at first, and I'll fully admit, when we started recording, I told you guys I have no idea what I was going to predict. So I've been thinking about it the whole time. But, you know, there was part of me that, like, let me go bold. Let me say, like, Trey Savage is going to throw a no-hitter. But I'm like, I got to save that. I got to wait until maybe I get into a funk and I don't get one for a couple weeks. And then I got to go bold again, and it's going to be right. And then I'm going to retire on my head. But, yeah, Riley Johnson, nice. It's not a safe prediction, but compared to last week, I think it's safe. So let's do it. Riley's going to prove me right.
Hopefully the ankle holds up so he can get enough torque on that swing to hit one out. Maybe the wind will be blowing out to right field. But, guys, this was fun. It was good to be back. And, again, thanks to you guys for holding down last week without me. Thanks to the commenters who dropped in a lot of great comments, a lot of great questions. And hopefully we'll be able to go basically every Monday night through the end of the regular season. And then as Luke says that the Reds just got walked off by the Braves, as Scott collapses his hand into his face.
How fitting. What great timing that was.
Good way to end it. I got walked off on.
Oh, man. Well, hey, at least you are an ECU fan and not a Cincinnati Bearcats fan. So
that's a good point.
We'll see what happens this weekend. All right, it's been real for Scott, for Jonathan. I am Steven. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Hoisted Colors podcast. We'll be back next Monday night, and also we should be back later this week with Nova Pirate. We're going to have a spring football recap. He was at the game taking notes, so we'll have that as well. So thank you guys for listening to the Hoist the Colors podcast. Talk to you guys next time.